YouTube, welcome to my YouTube channel, Annabella, and today I am going to be reviewing the somewhat controversial Netflix documentary, The Girl in the Picture. Lots of people have complained about this documentary for obvious reasons. It tells the true story of Sharon Marshall, who was found dead on the side of the road, completely abandoned. And when they took Sharon Marshall to the hospital, they found a whole host of strange things to do with Sharon Marshall. Sharon Marshall, or the girl that became Sharon Marshall, was taken as a child by a man named Franklin Floyd. Franklin Floyd had a history of kidnapping children, doesn't matter if they were a boy or a girl, and sexually abusing them. Franklin Floyd was briefly married to Sharon Marshall's mother, and he actually kidnapped all four of Sharon Marshall's mother's children while she was serving a 30-day sentence for some minor, very minor infraction. And when she got out, Franklin Floyd had put two of her daughters into foster care and had taken Sharon and her son Philip. Philip, we don't actually know what happened to this day, and Sharon, unfortunately, ended up being dead on the side of the road. This documentary allows the true story of Sharon Marshall to come forward and actually allows Franklin Floyd's personality to be finally revealed, because a lot of Sharon Marshall's friends, whether they be when she was working in a strip club as an adult because her father/husband made her do that, or whether she was at high school, noticed that there was something odd. Sharon Marshall had a variety of different names and aliases used. She was also known to be incredibly smart. She won a scholarship to do NASA engineering. Obviously, she wasn't allowed to take it up by her father, but even he acknowledged how clever she was by putting that rather strange ad in her yearbook. It was really odd, very sexualized picture of saying, "Congratulations for getting on to this NASA engineering program. You are so smart," with a really sort of beautiful picture of her. Very strange, in high makeup. Very odd. At the time it was commented on, and she got a full scholarship, so both her studies were paid and her accommodation, but because she was actually a kidnap victim, she couldn't go. The girl in the picture is actually a picture that one of the neighbours, I believe, took of her and her father. And they both look very strange. The girl is just absolutely distraught. It is horrifying, because Sharon Marshall spent the whole of her life with her abuser, and in fact she did have a child. It wasn't his, Michael, who did end up being kidnapped when he got put in foster care after Sharon Marshall's death. A lot of people have said that this whole story terrified them, and they said, why did they make this film? And I said the reason they made this film was so that Sharon Marshall could actually be revealed to be Susan Marie Skivansky, because that's her real name, and have her life mapped out so that people could actually understand it, so that her remaining relatives, because her father's still alive, her mother's still alive, her daughter is still alive. Yes, she did have a daughter who was put up for adoption by her and her abuser. It's an hour and 42 minutes long. Obviously it's rated 18, and it's a 30-year-old mystery. An FBI agent that was working on Sharon Marshall's death, and also they wanted to recover her son as well, because they found her son, they put him into foster care. He was doing really well. He was in elementary school, and Franklin Floyd kidnapped him and the principal. The principal ended up tied to a tree and torched. Yeah, he was not a pleasant fellow. And they did eventually manage to get Franklin to confess that he did shoot Michael in the back of the head, which I suppose is closure, because we know what happened to him, even if it's horrific. The whole thing is really shocking. But what is really shocking is the poor people that Sharon Marshall came into contact with. And they've said she was so supportive. She had one gay friend at high school who she would write positive notes to and support. And they just feel, well, we actually couldn't help her in her situation. I said, of course you couldn't. You were a child. There'd be no way. And in fact, your parents wouldn't have been able to, because Franklin Floyd was a really smart guy. He had this whole thing down to a T. He knew as soon as she graduated high school that they would have to move somewhere and that they'd have to change their names, and that's how he ended up marrying her. He knew that she would never leave him. He was using her to work in strip clubs so that he would get money, and he was using her as like a prostitute as well. It's a very, very strange dynamic going here. Not only was she being abused at home, he was also encouraging this abuse elsewhere. And it was interesting to hear one of the women who worked at a strip club with her say, as soon as we started commenting on the weirdness of the relationship, they disappeared and we couldn't actually get access. She said her supposed dad was really, really hot on who was allowed to talk to her at any moment. So she was constantly watched. There was no way. And remember, this was before social media really kicked in. And before social media, people as individuals didn't really have their own voice to get their story out. The only way you could do that is meeting people face to face or using the telephone, but that would involve other people in your family hearing. So if you wanted to go out to meet somebody, you would have to meet up at the town centre at a set time, and you'd have to wait for that other person to turn up. It was very much face to face based. There was telephone books so that you could phone anybody that you like, but it would take you maybe an hour and a half to find them in the phone book. Because Facebook has become the Yellow Pages, because we used to have a book with all the telephone numbers in back in the day. And this story allows Suzanne to actually have her story told from her perspective, and it actually allows the FBI agent who retired without solving it. He was able to come back during retirement and solve it for his own reasons, because he says that this case was so disturbing that he wanted to solve it. He felt that he'd figured out why Michael had died and various other bits, but he wanted to fill in more gaps. And you can understand that because it is so unique. And I also think it's because it happened sort of 60s, 70s and 80s. Because it happened then, and obviously a little bit into the 90s, because it happened then and we weren't so... You didn't have an internet life because the internet didn't exist at that point as it does today. So there are certain things regarding safeguarding that just didn't happen because we didn't have the infrastructure yet. It wasn't because people didn't care. It's because people didn't know that we needed that infrastructure. And it's cases like this and Jimmy Savile that have actually allowed a lot of safeguarding policies and practices to change. And this is a really important story and it does need to get out. Yes, it's horrific and terrifying, but actually when you understand that Suzanne Marie's mother was told, oh, go to church, you'll find a nice man there who'll marry you. She bumped into Franklin Floyd. But that was the attitude at the time when she went to go and ask for help, because her first husband, Suzanne Marie's father, was actually a return Vietnam veteran who was having mental health problems, understandably so, because they were teenage sweethearts. So obviously that relationship ended, leaving mum in somewhat of a pickle. What is interesting is the fact that everybody has turned around and said that her mother didn't look hard enough for her, and that is a case that can be brought, I think. But the whole situation is so unique because not only did they change their names and aliases and dates of birth, they actually moved states as well. So this story is fascinating. I really enjoyed watching it. I know some people found it really horrific and claimed it to be torture porn, and I can understand why, but actually these kind of difficult stories do need to be told, because not only do they allow the victim's side of the story to actually come forward, we're actually able to understand who the man that kidnapped Suzanne really was, because it took them a while to actually find an alias that they were able to link with his past crimes, so that they're able to know, this is the guy, because he completely dropped off the grid once he served various sentences because he changed his name and they weren't able to find him. So he was never showing up in any of these states to any police authorities because he was using a different name. Had he used his original name, they would have caught him at the drop of a hat. This guy knew what he was doing. It was all planned, and actually, because Suzanne Marie was quite smart and intelligent, it enabled her to live for a very long time with him. Not that that's a plus. I think this story is important because it allows her story to be told, and they actually ended up changing her tombstone because of the information that they were able to get from the investigation, because it was said Sharon Marshall on her tombstone. Well, that wasn't her real name. They were able to put a date of birth, her death date on, and actually have members of her family at the service of rededication of her tombstone, because before they didn't. So it's really important both for the people living and for the victim of this to have their story A, investigated properly by the FBI, and B, enable everybody to have some closure, because there's still a lot of mysteries. Because her daughter Megan, the one that was adopted, yes, she's named her son Michael after her dead brother, but she says, I know that my mother possibly has had other children, whether they're with Franklin or other men. She knows that she may not be the only one. So for her, it's an ongoing thing to try and piece it all together and to come to terms with it and live it. And as a viewer, the whole story has enabled closure for the two victims, that is Susanna and her son Michael. Obviously, and for the law enforcement agencies, because the FBI guy said that this is one of the most tricky cases he's ever had to work on, and he's an FBI agent and he's worked on some of the really difficult cases. So that just shows you, 5 out of 5. I found this fascinating. It's an hour and 42 minutes, and I do recommend a watch. It is certificate 18 for obvious reasons. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please like, comment and subscribe, and hope that you are staying safe where you are. Don't forget to click the notification bell to get my latest videos. Thank you so much for the support. Bye!